Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. My name is Sandra Martinez, and I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator. And I am joined today by Francesca Rodriguez, and she is an SEL Coordinator for the Conrad Feeder Pattern. And we're so excited to be here today to share this great information. Next slide, please. So you've had a really long day, a long week, a long year. And as parents, we tend to really focus on what we aren't doing, where we fall short. Social media tells us if our kids aren't speaking 6 languages at age 2, our homes aren't picture perfect, and we aren't 100% prepared for everything, that we need major work to do as parents, but not today. Instead, let's focus on what we are doing, right? Because parenting and caregiving is hard work. So let's celebrate you today. Did your kids smash? Yay, parenting win, right? Did you drink a glass of water today? Yes, self-care win, right? So let's just take a moment just to, it's the previous slide, please. Let's just take a moment just to breathe and to share your wins with us today. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great. So I am celebrating the fact that I filled up my gas tank before it went to E. So yay, responsible decision-making win for me. Next slide, please. So we are all we all really have a ton of stress every day, right? We are, inundated with all kinds of different stressors like, the pandemic, bills, lots of jobs. We have things coming at us from left and right. And so really, as we think about our stressors, let's think about also some of the things that maybe our children are experiencing as well. Next slide, please. So these are the kind of things that are stressing our children out. They are seeing the news, right? Social injustice, political unrest, the pandemic, academic pressures, through school. There's maybe big changes with their families. Perhaps they're experiencing bullying. Maybe they have a ton of things going on in their life. And so it's really important to understand that our children are experiencing the same type of stresses as we are. They're not immune to these stressors. And so we really have, when we think about our children, we really have to think about how do then we help them through those stresses. Next slide, please. There are 3 types of stressors. There is positive, tolerable, and toxic stress. In a positive stress is the things that we consider things like maybe things that we can recover from quite easily. Things like maybe moving, right? Moving from a house, or maybe, starting a new job. And these happen and are quick and they don't last a long time. We can get over these things. And then we start moving into more of a toxic stressors. These are things that are going to happen, like these are abuse. These are maybe there is alcoholism in the home. Maybe there is, homelessness, an extended amount of homelessness. And so the difference between all 3 is, if you can see here, there is in the tolerable and the toxic is supportive relationships, right? The positive we can handle pretty much on our own, right? We're like, oh yeah, I can manage that. Yes, my heart does elevate a little bit, but we can manage through. Then the tolerable and the toxic are more things that or events that we need more support. So when we don't have supportive relationships, whether it be a parent, a caregiver, an adult in our life, to be able to walk us through that, then we see negative impacts. Next slide, please. So again, here's where we notice the positive stressors, the toxic stressors, right? And we liken it to having water poured into our cups or into our glasses. Initially, it's not, it's not bad. We're like, we can handle this, but then we get into the toxic stressors. And these are compounded. So So you see more of health concerns and medical issues that arise from that because of all the different hormones that are being released into our body. And so then we start seeing long-term effects like heart issues or um, different types of issues, whether it be cancers and things like that, learning issues. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we are there for our children as they are experiencing those stresses so that we can then show them how they can alleviate those stresses. Next slide, please. So here are some of those long-term impacts. We have chronic inflammation, there are hormonal issues, there's heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. And what we see is that there are these long-term impacts are actually started when we're younger. And so Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris has it's called The Deepest Well. And The Deepest Well really talks about what we call adverse childhood experiences. And so what we see is that when we have these compounded toxic stressors, then we see these type of long-term effects when our children are older. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we are addressing these. And when we think about ourselves, right, when we think about how we internalize stress and how we deal with stress and how we, the type of symptoms that we may have. And we go back and we think about our own childhood, right? What kind of things were we exposed to possibly? What kind of things, happened in our lifetime that maybe added to these type of long-term impacts. And so I would suggest if you wanted to learn more about adverse childhood experiences, to read The Deepest Well. It's really great information, and it really gives light to a lot of the different problems that many of us are facing now. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we might see in our children, these are based, these are different based on age. But you might see moodiness, aggression, you might see a nervous habit, difficulty concentrating, refusal to go to school, maybe clinginess, right? So these are the type of things that you might see in your children. Next slide. The physical signs of stress. You might see in children or younger children or even older children regressing to bedwetting. You might hear of them having stomach aches or headaches. There might be a decrease or an increase in appetite, right? So some kids may not eat, and some kids will eat like a ton, right? And that'll be out of the normal. They might have sleep problems or nightmares. Obviously, if the stomach aches, headaches, these type of physical signs last longer than you would seem to think it's reasonable, then I would suggest, or we would, definitely encourage you to seek out medical attention through your child's pediatrician. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what happens with the brain and stress. Francesca, did you want to cover this?
Sure, I could do that
Thank
for you
you.
guys. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Francesca Rodriguez, and I'm a Northwest coordinator for SEL. When we're talking about stress and we're talking about what to do with stress, we definitely need to understand where does it come from and understanding the brain. So we're going to talk about three main parts of the brains. We're going to talk about prefrontal cortex, and I like to use my hand to understand the model. So if I put it sideways, this would be like my brain. So the first part right here would be this in the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that help us make the right choices. We tend to think about, am I doing this right? If I'm in a road, which way am I going to go? If I need to make a decision, I use this part. So then I have the amygdala, which would be somewhere in between towards the back of the brain. And this is a little part of the brain which impacts everything. This is the flight, fight, or freeze organ, and this is what we call the guard dog. Basically, when we encounter a situation where we feel that it's dangerous, this is the part where the amygdala will come alive and tell us either you have to fight, or you're going to flight, meaning you're just going to run, or you're going to freeze and not do anything. So this is important to know because as we think about stress and self-care, the amygdala is the part that is segregating those hormones to tell us that we need to do something. So we have to understand this in order to be able to mitigate with it, therefore understanding our bodies so we can then proceed to calm down. Then you have the hippocampus, and in the hippocampus is the part that of the brain that stores long-term memories. Why is this important? Because the way we react to a certain situation is going to be stored in the long-term memory. So if we learn how to manage our amygdala, meaning the guard dog, we will then react the same way in each time we encounter that situation of stress or fear. So also for students, our kids, this is important to know because the prefrontal cortex is where they get all the information. They then make those that information into long-term memory in the hippocampus. But if they are stressed out, if they are in high alert with the amygdala constantly going, they can't learn. They won't be able to learn. It's the same way as us. We won't be able to learn. If you're, think about it, if you're driving and you're stressed, you get to the point where you need to get, but then you won't remember how you got there. So it's the same way with education. So those three parts of the brain, very important for self-care, very important to manage stress. Next. Sandra, you want to, this is part of what I was just explaining.
Yes.
So,
Exactly. So, so how can we explain this to our kids, right? So when we picture a brain like a house, the downstairs is where important things live, like basic functions like breathing, strong emotions, innate reactions to danger, like Francesca was saying with fight, flight, or freeze. So when we have a conversation with our children and they're in a moment of like big emotions, we can always say, hey, are we talking, are we talking about, are you now talking to me with your upstairs brain or your downstairs brain, right? And so this allows them to really, stop and think about like where exactly their emotion, where exactly their reaction is coming from, right? And so it provides them a point of reference. Now, I wouldn't say like at that moment talk to them about a downstairs and an upstairs, right? That's probably not the best time to try to teach them. It's like, maybe doing this prior to that big emotion, prior to, a crisis moment, right? So, just think about like how or when you would then set a time aside to be able to do that. This could be, explaining, even modeling yourself, right? Saying, okay, today I was in, really heavy traffic and mommy was really, really stressed out, or mom was really stressed out. And, sometimes how I deal with stress is I, breathe in. I do a box breathing, right? You breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold it for 4. Breathe in for 4, right? And so that's called box breathing. And so that allows time between having that big emotion and then having the reaction. So having those conversations inorganically, in organic events, organic moments, like, oh, my dog just ran across, my clean floor. okay, I'm going to do my box breathing and showing your children modeling, because we really are our children's first teachers. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are healthy ways in which your child can cope in response to stress, and they just need some help and guidance, like I mentioned, right? So you can help them in the following way. So at home, make sure that they're having, make sure that they have a um, routines, right? That there is a definite dinner time, if possible, definite bedtime, right? And so this allows them to understand like when things are happening. It makes their environment seem calm and safe and a secure place. Now, granted, I know everybody has different schedules. I know everybody has different life situations, and we understand that. But as much as possible, try to stick with that, or at least let them know ahead of time so that you can say, hey, you're going to spend time with grandma, tonight because mom has to go to work. This is what's going to happen. So then that way they feel like, oh, they're part of that decision. Monitor what they're watching. Sometimes stress comes from what kids are watching and what kids are exposed to, right? So what are they seeing? What are they hearing? If we're involved in that, then we can better help them regulate, right? So it's a good idea to understand like what they are being exposed to. Next slide, please. Also, providing them healthy outlets, things like sports. Obviously we are, in a pandemic, and we are, there is physical distancing, but it could be something that they're doing, at home, whether it's, doing exercises online. Maybe you have a dance party, maybe, just something that kind of gets them involved. Making social connections. There's a lot of online groups now that things are kind of opening up a little bit more, maybe, scouts or things like that that are practicing healthy distancing. And then, like I mentioned before, notify your kids of any sort of changes, discuss what it's going to mean for them in terms of school. If you're moving, tell them you're moving, tell them, hey, this is how it's going to impact you. This is what is going to happen. Because really we want them to be as aware as possible, and so then they can feel that they can feel like they're part of that discussion, and then they can then feel like they can free to ask those questions, like how is this going to impact me? What you can say, this might be a scary moment, this I remember and this is just I remember going to the doctor's office and no one telling me I was going to get a vaccine, getting there and thinking, oh, I'm just going for a regular doctor's visit. And then here comes the shot, right? And so I'm just like, oh my gosh, and I would freak out. And so if I were just have been told ahead of time, hey, this is going to happen, yes, it might hurt, but I'm going to be there with you, I'm going to help you through it, then maybe the
And I think she's frozen.
to having those conversations with you. Next slide, please. So again, modeling healthy ways to manage stress. Like I mentioned before, in those organic moments, talk about how you deal with stress. Say, hey, I need just a few minutes when you get home from work, and things are going crazy at home. Hey, I need like 5 minutes. Can y'all give me 5 minutes? I'm going to go to my calming area and I'm going to, just breathe for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back. And when I come back, then we can talk about whatever it is, right? Engage and listen. Being in someone's presence doesn't mean that they are being present, right? And so just like when you say, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you, like I want to know that you are paying attention. Have those conversations with your children. Having those like a family treatment agreement is a great way to understand like what your children need from you. I need for you to, when you're washing dishes and I'm talking to you, to look at me or to stop washing dishes and, and answer or talk to me, right? Or maybe, hey, I really want to talk to you about something, after dinner, and having those type of conversations. Um, Affection, encouragement, and positive reinforcement. These are all great things, right? And to say, yes, you're doing great, celebrate those small moments. Um, because the more you do that, the more you actually do that. Um, and really, just reinforcing those and also, be willing to show those boundaries or be willing to respect your children's wishes. When there are issues and they're having those big moments, if you are going to hug them and they say, I don't want to be hugged, respect that, for that moment, say, okay, I understand that. Because we as adults, we feel sometimes that way too, right? So it's like, Lee, just give me a moment to, um, get myself back into the right frame of mind, right? And so just, allow them that, allow them those moments. Next slide, please. So some great ways to really have conversations with your kids is to use books. It's not too late. I mean, even if your kids are in high school, it's fine. Talk to them about the books. Talk to them about books they're reading. Talk about a book that you're reading, right? Share lessons learned. It could be, we have a couple of books here that, we would recommend. Ida Always has to do with death and loss. Walk with Vanessa is about bullying. Behind My Mask is about the pandemic. Something Happened in Our Town is about racial injustice. Kids are not ever too old um, to be exposed to picture books, have them explain to you like how that, how it impacts them. Many of these books are available as read alouds also um, on YouTube and Vimeo. And so, this allows time for you to ask questions and, um, and see what your children's opinion or how they're feeling about certain situations. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we were mentioned, I just mentioned the box breathing, and so we have another one. There's different types of um, breathing strategies, right? And so we have this one. It's called breathing ball, and so we have a breathing strategy here, and so it's with a Hoverman sphere. We don't always use a Hoverman sphere. You can use your arms too, right? I mean, your arms. You don't have to have a Hoverman sphere. And so what you do is you just breathe in. You follow the ball and then you breathe out. You breathe in and you breathe out. And so you do this a number of times until you start feeling your body relaxing. So as Francesca was mentioning, this allows when that amygdala is like you flipped your lid and you have that amygdala and it's enlarged. This gives you a moment between that big emotion where you're here and it reduces it. It gives it a moment to kind of like shrink up a little bit, and so then you can make your reaction is probably going to be a lot better, right? We've all experienced, and we're adults, and I've experienced it before too, where it's like you say something you didn't mean. Well, that's because your amygdala is talking, right? You're like, I don't even remember because your prefrontal cortex is not making the best decision. And so that just gives you those breathing strategies, just really give you an opportunity just to take a moment between that big emotion and that reaction. Next slide, please. So, when we're talking about toxic stress, the absence of a safe, stable, and nurturing adult in a child's life can have really negative physical, emotional results. And so that's why it's so important to build social support systems for your child, right? And so, and for those who are finding themselves really struggling, it's okay to get mental health support, right? You wouldn't tell somebody who is struggling with high blood pressure to not go to the doctor, right? Seek the advice of a healthcare practitioner, counselor, or therapist if the signs of stress do not lessen or if your child becomes more withdrawn, depressed, or more unhappy. And so as we wrap up, I'd like to close with a head, heart, and hand activity. So begin by thinking about something you learned or thought during our time together. Think about something you felt during, this time with us. Um, and learn during one of our activities, perhaps. And lastly, think about something that you will do or that you will take away today. And if you'd like to share it in the chat, please feel free to do so. Okay, and I think this may have been this is an outdated slide, but we have session 6, I'm sorry, has to do with managing stress with mindfulness. And so that is going to be on April 21st from 4:30 to 5:30 is the English version. And then from 6 to 7 is the Spanish version. The QR code in the middle and both bit.ly links that are on this screen will get you to the registration. We're going to be talking about mindfulness and how mindfulness can help reduce stress. And we're going to be doing several different activities. We're going to be doing like these, really quick mindfulness strategies. We're also going to be doing mindfulness eating. We're going to be doing a mindfulness breathing activity, a mindfulness body scan. And so we're going to be doing several different activities to help manage stress at home. And of course, these are all things that you can use with your family, things that you can show your family. And we, really encourage you to share the information that you've learned today with your family and your children. Many of them have already been exposed to the to different, their information about the brain and information about the upstairs and downstairs brain. And so, just really have those conversations, ask them, hey, have you, what do you know about it? Or, what kind of things do you do at school? And, have them really share that with you. And so that way you can start those conversations.
And Sandra, I wanted to add really quick because I saw that Mama de Faustino Flores said that she is going to have to listen more to her 3 kids and she wants to practice more of the breathing exercises. I always say the breathing exercises, as you teach them, you're going to be using them and you're going to notice that it's really good for you too. So part of your self-care as a grown person, you should do it. You should do some of those exercises that we explained today and join Sandra for the next one with the mindfulness. You'll learn a lot more about how to work into the mindfulness. And also I have Miss Potter saying, thank you for the tip on managing stress. The ball exercise to calm me down went really well, and they do. Those are 30 to 1 minute, really quick breathing exercises that help you calm down and refocus. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, and just so that you know, there is is it a GIF or a GIF? I never know. And there's one that's actually a mindfulness ball that you can download, and it's really, it's really helpful. A lot of these, if you just look through the internet for mindfulness apps, mindfulness or breathing strategies, you will find a ton of different resources. And not everything's going to work for every situation or for every person. And it's just really just finding something that really works for you. Doing the starfish, doing the breathing in, 1, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in. And so you do that, long. And so we call it, starfish for little kids. And sometimes we call it take 5, right? So those are all the different, there's so many different variations that people can use, because we know that, life is stressful. We understand it, and we're all doing the best that we can. And so, self-care is very, very important, because, you can't help others unless you're your best self at that moment, right? A lot of times we're told that, as parents especially, that, we have to put our kids first and we have to do everything for them. And anything that we do for ourselves is considered selfish or self-indulgent. And the reality is that how can we, take care of somebody else if we're depleted, if we're not at our 100, percent? And also these things can, we saw it took 30 seconds, right? I think I just read a study where they talked about how, most people in the United States spend over 2.5 hours on social media every day. And so it's like, okay, how about we just take 30 seconds of that and do something like this? And I think you'll see that this is much more beneficial for, for you, mentally and physically. So